this isn't, it's all not all going to be one fell swoop. So if we make a mistake or you say something and you think like, oh, I don't want that, just kind of
run out of the room.
No, just start again.
Tears.
I quit.
Yeah. So maybe we can start by having you introduce yourself and what you teach.
Okay. So my name is Etienne Lombard, and I'm teaching Humanities 8, Careers 8, Business 9, and Career Life Education 10 this year. But I have done Aboriginal education, Aboriginal support teaching in SD 8. I'm a teacher at KCLC, with all the responsibilities that comes with. And I think that's it. Yeah, those are most of the teaching jobs.
Oh, boy, covering everything. So I'm Karen Shaw. I teach at Stanley Humphrey Secondary as well. My this year comprises English First Peoples 12 for the first time, FRAL 12, or Immersion French 12, Drama 9, Senior Drama 10 to 12, and that's it. And Bridging English. How could I forget Bridging English? That's like the biggest focus of my year. So teaching English language learners who need a little extra support to get their language level to where they can fully engage with their other classes in an equitable way. Before that, many other things. So French immersion focus for several years. Before that, in Australia, mostly English and social studies, some drama, some French.
All right, so maybe Karen, you could start us off. Could you tell us a few stories about how you've used circles in your classroom?
Well, in a variety of ways. I find, particularly for grade 12s, no matter what the course is, regular check-ins are really important. And circles can be useful in that regard, so long as it's not an everyday occurrence. For me, I use circles as when we are dealing with an issue or something that is important, but it doesn't have to be something that's important to the broader community. It can be something that's just important to the people who are involved. So for example, going around and doing a check-in 1 to 10, how are you feeling about your future today? and then breaking that up into your general prospects beyond school, getting through the next 2 days, getting through the rest of the school year, getting to graduation if that's relevant. And then adding in, I would generally ask some of the same questions. So that recursive piece, the repetition, so that it's easier for students to come up with answers, especially when you're dealing with students who are English language learners. Having that predictability of what's being asked of them is really important. And for that too, for FRAL 12 or for Bridging English, I would put, for instance, the questions on the A revision so people can see what's coming and they can have some thoughts ahead of time. And always, always having the option to pass, for sure.
How about you, Etienne?
So I'm still a relatively new teacher, so everything that I do is always new, which can be scary, but at the same time, I feel like I'm learning how to do these things in ways that make sense, like actively. And that's probably the part that I like the most about having circles, both as like a physical space of people sitting in a circle, and also as kind of like a pedagogy to remind us that we're not in a hierarchy, that we're a group of people, that we'll only be able to see each other and find ways to do that all the time. So this year, I'm trying to do the Circle of Courage for the whole year with the Humanities 8 group. So we sort of split up the year, starting with belonging, going into mastery. We just finished independence, and our 4th quarter of the year we're doing generosity, just so that we really try to grow as a whole group, as a whole person throughout the year. And so that we don't just have these blind spots where we're trying to just really focus on one part of ourselves, the sort of like blindness to the rest of it. So it's mainly being used in a way as like a life skills type way of like growing our class community. So that's kind of my main focus right now. a lot of students I find that are at risk, and that if I don't have that part and we just try to move forward with academics alone, like I don't think I would be comfortable with, you know, the whole year as it's maybe coming to a close now. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like, for me, it's decolonizing practice that helps people to remind each other that we're all in the room, that we're not separate, that we are together, and we have to actually figure out how to look out for each other. Because if you don't have that circle, there's always missing spaces, and so that's mainly what I look for. It's really an exercise in empathy. Yeah.
Karen, is there anything that you thought of while Etienne was talking?
Oh boy, I'm just thinking extra things. I would just connect that directly to core competencies. That's essentially what Etienne is talking about.
Yeah.
That connects back to the core competencies, and I find in senior it can be very easy to lose sight of some of those. At least the intentionality that's intended for the core competencies and their implementation in the classroom. I find the circles help to remind me of those, and the introduction piece is very important. I find that classes who have gone around and done an introduction have had an opportunity to do it a few times, especially with a few different traditional knowledge keepers. There are always students who change how they introduce themselves over time as they feel safer, as they feel more valued and relevant, that they matter. You can tell that there's this tendency to include less detail in responses early in the piece. When you first start with circles, you're going to have a lot of passes. Probably the majority of students will pass, and that's fine. I think the most important thing is to use that recursive nature of the circle, to come back around, to have the same question and just keep going back around, even 2 or 3 times. And then you may get to a point where everybody passes one time when you do it. That doesn't mean you failed. It means that they're ready to move on to the next thing. And so the next question, the next topic, the next check-in. And I wanted to mention with the check-ins, the check-ins for me are always followed by sharing strategies. You rarely get someone say they're 10 out of 10 on any particular topic that you ask them to sort of do a self-check-in about. So what do you do when you're at a 1 to a 4? What strategies do you use then? Are they different from the strategies you would use from a 4 to an 8, for example? And those would be 2 separate questions. Again, it depends who you have. If you have a group of grade 12s who are very much into it, who have done several circles before, who are feeling very comfortable with the process, then the circle could even go on for half an hour. But the first few times that you do it, it'll probably be fairly brief. And it's kind of like when you start doing mindfulness, you start off with 1 minute or even 10 seconds is good, especially with elementary classes. And you build up that trust and that comfort, that feeling of safety, that this is a safe place. And I find, especially in senior classrooms, when you just have a discussion on an issue, what will happen is 4 or 5 people will share the floor. I like to use the Finesse document rubric about discussions, because one of the criteria is about how you share the floor. Do you ask questions of other people? Do you offer opportunities for other people to speak? I might even, and so even though those discussions might not be in a talking circle form, then when you're having those more unstructured discussions, people are less likely to pontificate for 5 minutes. And they're more likely to listen because they know they're actually being marked on how well they included what somebody else said in the discussion. I don't tend to mark talking circles. I'm not trying to imply that. But when we're having discussions, certainly if we have a topic that we've prepared and readings that we've done ahead of time, absolutely. And the talking circles are great training for that. It's little increments, little bits. It might take a long time to get to where you want to be, and each group is different. Some groups just never get beyond the 5-10 minute mark. That's just how it is.
Yeah, I have a response. Yeah, that I think we've talked about this in the past actually. That it's like if you have, your English First People 12 class, it shows if people have had a lot of experience already, right? And so for me, like one of the big values in trying to advocate for circles is that just like any other skill in schools, that we have this chance to get students to be really good at this over time. If they're doing it every year and they're learning about it every year, and not just from their teachers, but potentially community members, folks that really know how to do the skill really well, then they'll get through school and they'll get to high school and they'll be able to just like zone in and understand each other and grow in communities that are reflective. And I don't know, that would be my big hope, that they're getting to 8th grade and that they really do know how to do this well already and they're prepared, and more than that, they understand the benefits of it already, connecting with others and how that can really feel good. Yeah.
Could we move on to the question of how you imagine circles evolving in your teaching practice? Like if you could imagine it in when you're the perfect teacher in a million years, what would circles look like in your classroom?
Maybe in a couple of years I'll be doing what Karen's doing. It could be some of that.
Students, it's good.
Do you have something already for this question?
Oh gosh, I'm a little tricky for sure.
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it. I'll
All right.
think about it while you go.
Okay, so I understand that talking circles should be about important things, and it shouldn't be a non-event. But at the same time, it would be lovely if they were not something that needed to be pre-taught, not something that I spent a lot of time at the beginning of EFP 12, English First Peoples 12 this year, setting the framework for how we were going to operate, for the cultural, historical context. And I keep thinking how wonderful it's going to be to teach EFP 12 eventually and have students who have all had experience with all of these different ways of knowing and ways of learning, and who understand that it takes time to build trust, and that's okay. To be able to just say, okay, we're going to have a talking circle on this topic now, and have everyone, I guess, just sort of switch gears. It is a gear shift. It's not a class discussion. It's not a game in a circle. I think we're sort of loaded with games in circles and to associate circles with fun, loud activities. Whereas this is more about focus and being present and allowing somebody else to share their experience and their knowledge, to be a learner, and that we all are. I want to get to a point, I think, if I had to say one thing, where my role is holding the space if needed, if reminders are needed and so on, for staying on task or whatever. But other than that, having students be able to take turns leading, to have a grade 12 English course or a grade 12 Francais course feel more like a seminar on some days, where it's not me, which would probably be a lot more work, but yeah, I really enjoy seminar courses. I mean, I can see the students who really enjoy having some control and some leadership, academically.
Thank you. You really helped me out. I think I have a simple goal, and I think I have a more complex, idealistic goal. So my simple goal is just really just getting to the point consistently in classes with groups where students get comfortable with giving something or that they want to bring themselves to it, that they see it as an opportunity to share who they are and their voice. So that's my goal. I feel like we get there in small chunks, slowly. And then, yeah, so I really want to get better at that. I'm trying to get there quickly. And when I've seen elders and knowledge holders hold circles, like they're able to get there really quickly with people. So that's something I've really admired and I'm trying to figure out. Long term, I like to think of circles not just as like a space of like having students or anybody in one circle, but circles as like a community. And so my like long-term goal or vision would be to work in schools where everybody understands that they're a part of like a community of people that can share consistently, openly, given each other's positions, and that there's sort of like these concentric circles within a school. So there's the staff as a circle that really can come together, maybe not on everything, but can come together. I mean, that is the goal of like a staff meeting, but can we do it where, everybody does share? Maybe it's concise, but at least there is that space. And I think that if you have that, and you have the larger circle of the full school staff, and you have these kinds of like concentric circles of communication, that when students are in the class and they are sharing and they are like sharing of themselves, that those like that communication will feel clear and comfortable to them, that they know where sort of they're a part of, and the staff know where like how they're a part of everything. Hopefully that makes sense. Sort of like a metaphor in a way, but also means collecting together at discrete times to solve problems and to share problems that you can like come together and figure out together. Yeah.
Yeah, I just was thinking, there are a few different things. That communication piece, I agree entirely. I agree with everything Etienne said.
Of course.
And I wanted to reinforce, yes, when it comes to circle pedagogy, I've read a lot, but nothing has taught me more than interacting with traditional knowledge keepers and being able to ask them questions and being able to be open to the knowledge and lore that they've been comfortable sharing with me and with the group, and witnessing the use of story to open the circle. We did a professional development yesterday and talking about the importance of story. And I'm realizing that every single traditional knowledge keeper that I've had in any of my classes has always started with a very solid recount of how they got to where they are. And I feel like there's room for us to be doing that. As teachers, we keep ourselves so very separate. Obviously, we have to edit, but we are often reluctant to share our own journeys while we're asking students to share theirs. So being generous ourselves so that others will feel comfortable being generous with the trust, I think, is essential.
I know that we're coming out of a period of like pretty intense isolation with like this COVID isolation behind us, and I know as a person that's like coming to be a new teacher during that time, there were so many moments I felt genuinely really isolated, like really isolated. And it wasn't because people didn't want to connect. It's that all of the things that already were there, which people would usually connect over, were severed off. And then you're coming into workplaces where not only are you new, which is a challenge, but also it's a government mandate to not communicate. So there were a few moments where there was this like motivation for staff to get together in a circle in these brief, not lockdowny periods. And it was like those few moments that actually kept me connected to those schools. So I just really think circles for me are just about not being isolated, the opposite of that.
How about, could you speak at all to whether there's any sort of structure or instructions or guidance that you give to open a circle? If someone is wanting to do a circle with their class, could you tell them, like, okay, these are the top 3 things that I remind students of before we start, or these are the instructions that I give, or the parameters that I give?
I feel like I know more than I can start, though. I keep giving you the responsibility of starting.
I'm happy.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to.
Okay. Yeah.
So the arts are important. As a drama teacher, I use a lot of the same basic skills and guidelines for circles that I use to start any drama class. So in a drama class, it comes under audience etiquette for my class rules. And so it is giving your focus to the speaker. And what does that look like? What does that sound like? So, for instance, having your face toward the person, you don't need to make eye contact, but being your face actually turned toward the speaker. Your body is centered in the circle as opposed to looking around for what somebody's doing over there or whatever the case may be. And obviously no distractions. No distractions, the most obvious one is devices, right? But there are many other ways that one can be distracted. One is staring out the window. Another is being too fascinated by somebody else who's trying to across the circle at you and the teacher's looking another way or whatever. So allowing other people to stay focused and being present. So actually listening, actively listening to what other people have said, to the point where when you're going around, I actually encourage people to say, for instance, I agree with so-and-so if they don't really feel that they have anything to add. Just that act means that they were paying attention to what so-and-so said. And sometimes you'll get a series, especially in my bridging class. I'll get a series of, I agree with so-and-so. I also agree with so-and-so. I also agree with so-and-so. And then you get, but that's just part of the process. You'll get to a point where people have more ownership for their own contributions, but allowing people to support one another that way, I guess. But it doesn't have to be, you are not alone in that circle. You are not entirely responsible for the content coming from your portion of the circle. Yeah, I would say those are the biggest ones. Just being present, focusing on the person who is actually doing the speaking, no matter who they are.
It's probably not generally super common to have like something to write on during circle, but when I'm doing circle of courage work, I really do like it. I like breaking down each part of the circle. What we've been doing is we'll be on generosity, for example, and we will go to what Martin Broken Leg has said would goes with generosity. One of the things that goes with generosity is empathy. So being able to give empathy, being able to understand what healthy empathy looks like. And so actually, just try to focus on maybe one big idea that we can go deeper with. So like something simple so we can all go deep into our own memories and our own place in thinking about what that is and what it looks like. So we can move forward with a group with some shared knowledge that we got in circle that didn't need to just be taught, but that was actually just shared in. As far as any other strategy goes, I feel like the circle does hold itself a lot of the time, and that's sort of the beauty of it. But not always.
And that's okay.
And yeah, so I mean, sometimes I have to separate students out and be like, don't sit next to your friends only. And I always just kind of repeat over and over, especially to 8th graders, that we're all here together at this time. So that means that just being on one side, focusing only on one side, is not really fully interacting with what our purpose and goal is, to grow as a group.
You raise a really interesting point, which is, where do you do it? Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So having the teepee here, each time that we've had the teepee here, it has just made talking circles feel so much more I don't know, deep. Being in that space is really important. Removing from the classroom space, doing them outside is really important. But within the classroom, like I'm hearing Etienne mentioning taking grade 8s and getting them to shift from one space to another. That in itself is inherently interruptive. But if you have a large enough space, having your desk set up in a U or some other configuration where it's easy for students to get into a circle-ish shape, square, whatevs, it doesn't have to be perfectly rounded as long as it has that suggestion of circle. For me, it's different for everyone, and certainly in grade 2 it would be a very different thing. But not having that transition be quite so physical, but more mental and emotional for senior classes, for senior grades, I find is more useful. When I get students to move their chairs, they are just as, I guess, respectful and so on within the space, but there's almost this resentment, this, why do we have to do this when we could just X, Y, Z? So listening to, taking suggestions from students about how circles should go, doing check-ins. What we don't want is to start doing talking circles within your group, have everything fall apart over and over again, and not listen. And if it's falling apart, it's because something needs to change. What needs to change? Figuring out a way to get that feedback. And so I've had several circles about circles. What works, what doesn't, what would you rather see, what would you like to see more of, should we be doing that, and those are really helpful too. Trying to force it, making it possible, I guess, making the space for circles in your practice and making the space for circles in your teaching space, indoor and outdoor, is the most important thing. Making it happen doesn't have to be a big effort, and it shouldn't feel like hard work for you. So again, starting off short, making it less of a major event. It's important. It doesn't have to be a massive change from how you normally do things. If that, yeah.
Great, thank you. So the last question is just, and I know you spoke a little bit to the FNESC discussion rubric that you've used. You spoke a little bit to Dr. Martin Brokenline, Circle of Courage. Are there any other resources that you call on? You spoke of knowledge holders and what you've learned from knowledge holders of the land, of being in the TP as resources. Are there other resources that you want to mention?
To me, one of the big resources is involving, the great thing about Circle, I think, is at least if the students are somewhat comfortable, and sometimes you can break that comfortability a little bit by bringing other people in the school into your class in those spaces, right? So that can be anybody. That can be counselors, EAs in the class. I find it really good that EAs get a chance to join in on these discussions and voice their own feelings and concerns so that they don't feel, again, like they're isolated. So a great resource can be other people in the school, especially Indigenous support workers who, in many cases, have a lot of knowledge and are just looking for a chance to share that in a space that's safe. I find that to be probably the most important resource as a person in school who's not a resource, a human being. Sometimes, okay.
Humans are resources.
We're
resources.
Sometimes I get, okay. So there's another really good resource I found that really made me think about like communities as circles is Elder Gary Oldman from Teachings in the Air. So he talks really specifically about this, and he talks about how a community is a circle, and when somebody is outside of the circle, that is when they're vulnerable. Like that's when they're in a place where they can learn things and they can take on habits that can harm others. And that like a journey of like healing and a journey of understanding yourself means coming back to a circle and having that peer interaction so that you can learn about yourself and learn about the ways that if you are in a risky position or an at-risk student, you can actually learn a little bit about yourself so you don't harm others anymore. So the teachings in AIR has been really valuable for me. And it's also personable enough to like share with students and just really, really accessible.
Have you been listening to it as
As
the podcast?
the podcast. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So available online too. It's just the best for that. Other resources, Indigenous support worker Brittany Hagen has told me or taught myself and many others that you can use objects that smell as a way to bring memories out. So you can give everybody some cedar or something that smells more. You can use sweetgrass, anything like that. So really medicines to help people connect with their memories and their senses, which are happening like right now. So it's connecting now to your past and your emotions. So that's been really cool as well. Yeah.
Well, when it comes to doing research, I'd say that Etienne's ahead of me. I guess the internet is amazing. And there's so much out there, podcasts and videos and resources that various universities and colleges and FNESC and the First Nations Education.ca, I think anyway. But definitely Indigenous support workers. Every single time that I've started doing talking circles with a class, I've had an Indigenous support worker with me, with one exception. And just incredible lifelong learners, just model that. So willing to say, oh, I don't actually know about that. I'll go find out for you, and I think as a teacher, I some of the resources that Etienne spoke about, I've encountered a few others, but really just do your own research and find what works for you, and it will shift over time. I would say the number one piece of advice in terms of learning more about talking circles is never feel like you've learned enough. I mean, we don't with teaching. This is another tool for teaching, but it's also an entirely different methodology, and just keep doing that. Professional development. People are so happy to share what they know. They really are, especially about things like talking circles. Everyone's really excited because they're so wonderful. People who use them are not scared. yeah, they're you get comfy with them, and they're such a great way into units. They're a great way to close units. They're a great way to transform what we've been learning to get ready to start our process for, say, writing an essay or whatever the case may be.
Is there anything else that you need to say or you think we should say before we close off today?
Just do it.
Yeah, I think for me, probably the biggest thing that is holding people back for making changes that bring all voices together in space like a circle is fear. It seems like people are too afraid to do something wrong. People are too afraid to give away power, and it seems like if they're willing to give away power, they'll get so much more back from everyone they work with, kids, teachers, whoever you're working with. You'll get so much more back if you just relinquish the control. Sometimes there's some things you can be controlling about, and you have to be, for sure, especially like things like safety, but you'll just get more from people. That's the way I feel.
I think, too, so many of us, white settlers especially, are so nervous about doing it wrong.
Yeah.
It is possible to do things wrong. It's possible to do anything that you do. It's possible to do it wrong. But there is so much information out there, and there are so many people who are willing to share their experiences.
In the school. Every
Yeah.
school, actively.
Yeah.
They're all there.
And no one expects you to just go from, I don't know how to use talking circles, to I'm going to use talking circles every day, or whatever the case may be. It's just, it's another tool. It's another tool.